The Braves jumped out to an early 5-1 lead and dropped it, losing 6-5 to the Cincinnati Reds, pushing them 2 games behind the New York Mets for the final wildcard spot. Is that it? Yes, welcome on into Braves Today for Wednesday, September 18th. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. He's Christian Rauh. You can follow him on Twitter at Christian S. Rauh, R-A-U-H. You can find all of our written work at bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack. And apologies for no show yesterday. We've both been dealing with sickness and just could not get in front of our computers to get a show up. But we're coming back because we got to talk about it. We got to talk about this. Atlanta gets out to an early 5-1 lead on Cincinnati. The bats came to play early. They go at 3-1 in the first inning. It was really exciting, right? It looked like this was going to be the Braves rolling here. Michael Harris hits a homer. Jorge Soler adds one in the fourth after Brandon Williamson leaves the game early. And then Atlanta just stops scoring, right? Atlanta ends up in this game 2 for 9 with runners in scoring position. They strand 14 runners, including the game-tying run on second in the 9th. And every inning except the 3rd inning had a Braves runner left on base. This has been a problem for the Braves all year. And this kind of goes back to last week's episode about Chipper Jones and his talking about the approach and everything. Atlanta has been 21st in OPS with runners in scoring position this year. 728 OPS, which is not great. And it's not all been because of injuries. It's not just the replacements haven't been good. Ronald Acuna Jr. had a 676 OPS in those situations before he got hurt. Austin Riley had a 716. Only 2 members of the roster have had an OPS over 800 with runners in scoring position with at least 20 at-bats. Marcell Ozuna and Matt Olson. That's it. With this loss, the way that it happened, right? Pierce Johnson in a little bit of a slump. I'll get to the details on that in a minute and things like that. And the Mets continuing to surge like they are. Is this it for the Braves? Are their postseason hopes pretty much over now?
Yeah, I mean, it's all but almost just officially calling it, to be honest. It's really hard to have confidence in this Braves team when they can't play a full game compared to what everyone else is doing. The New York Mets look very good right now. Even with the Diamondbacks slumping, they're slumping at the exact same rate as the Braves, so they're not really gaining any traction from them as well. I think we're going to wind up seeing the Mets overtake the Diamondbacks and be the second wild card, by the way. And
they are tied right now. Yeah.
And I think the fact that we were talking about there was a chance that we might see both the Mets and the Braves in the wild card. The Mets are doing their job. The Braves are not. I don't think there's going to be a single flip-flop left in the Atlanta area that has not hit a TV because of the fact that they just can't finish games. They just can't finish games. We saw it in the series finale against the Dodgers where it was the opener against the Reds. We didn't get a chance to talk yesterday where they were.
Game 3 against LA. They scored some runs early and then from that point on got shut out the last 15 innings of that series.
No, 100%. And then they were stuck on second. They were stuck on third. There was multiple times where they were in scoring position and they could not capitalize. On yesterday's game, it was no different, as you just mentioned. It was nice to see the home run ball early. There's no doubt about it. That was exciting. That was like, okay, maybe we're in one of these peak phases. Maybe the valley's over. I know I keep talking about peaks and valleys with this team, but I don't have a better definition, a better example. That's exactly what it feels like. You have one good game, and in this case, it seems like you get about 5 good innings now, and then you're right back down to where you were with this offense. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating because this team has all the talent. We've heard about it all season long. This team has the talent to do it. Even with the injuries, they still have the talent to do it. This pitching staff is fantastic. You put this pitching staff up against any other team in the postseason, they're going to be able to compete. But that offense is not doing their job. And we're probably going to, because of that, not be able to see this amazing pitching staff in the postseason.
Yeah, and you're really in a bad place because of Marcell Ozuna's slump right now. I'm going to have something coming out about that soon on the Braves Today Substack about what the struggles that he's in right now. He is still hitting, mind you. He's just not hitting for power. His homerless streak is now 26 games. He's batting 274 over that stretch. 367 on base, 316 slugging. Only 4 extra base hits out of his 26 hits. Those are all doubles. He struck out 26 times. Still, he's walked 14. But because of the lack of power, only 4 RBI in that stretch. And I think you're seeing the effects. He's one of those guys I mentioned all season. He's been one of the really good hitters with runners in scoring position. His OPS was 924 with runners in scoring position. And right now, obviously, he's not producing at the plate other than base hits. And you need base hits. You need guys to get on. But given where he's hitting in the order, you need him to be driving in Michael Harris, to be driving in Jorge Soler, or if somebody in the bottom of the lineup happens to get on, to be driving them in, and he's just not doing that right now. And so part of me wonders, when are you going to have to swap the lineup again and move people around a little bit to try to minimize your exposure to Marcell Ozuna's lack of power right now? I also am a little bothered because I think it was comments, I want to say it was in The Athletic, David O'Brien, they mentioned fatigue. And I know it's been a long season, right? They've played 100 and something games, but he's also a designated hitter. He's not playing the field every day. And so it's a little frustrating as a fan to hear you blame fatigue for the lack of power production right now, when in reality it's been teams aren't throwing him fastballs. He's a very good fastball hitter. Teams aren't throwing him fastballs. He's having to sit off speed, sit breaking stuff. And when they do get him a fastball, because he's sitting on soft stuff, he's late on it. And so it's frustrating, and I don't quite know how you fix it between now and the end of the season, but it's something that's got to get fixed if this team has a chance of catching either the Diamondbacks or the Mets in the wild card race.
Yeah, I don't think fatigue can be an excuse, because Matt Olson has also played every single game this season for the Braves. And in the last 7 games, he has a 1.180 OPS, and he's hit some home runs and some RBIs, and he's looked good. So I don't think that can be an excuse.
And he's playing very good defense at first base.
Exactly. And my point, he's not the DH. I find it really difficult to point fingers at Ozuna as like the only guy. And I know you're not doing that, but I find it hard doing that, because if it wasn't for Ozuna, we would not even be in this conversation of, can the Braves make the playoffs with 11 games to go? Because what he did for the team all season long. So I find it difficult to give him as much criticism, probably as what he deserves, because he is struggling at the plate right now. I would also like to see him move down from third in the lineup. I don't know where you'd put him, 5, 6, just for a little bit to get him out of the slump. But not many other players are doing as good as well. Who do you put at third to do that? You can move up a couple players, I guess that'd be fine, but are you really going to get any more production if you do that? I was also thinking about that when I wrote takeaways the other night of Ozuna still slumping, and you can't have that production with a guy that's batting third in your lineup. But when I look back in hindsight, who goes in that spot, Lindsay?
Yeah, maybe Ramon Laureano, but I think that's about the only real thought that I have there is maybe Ramon Laureano. That's the hard part right now with all of these injuries and things like that. The guys you would have there, that'd be the Austin Riley spot. He's out. Ozzie Albies could bat there. He's out. We'll get to Ozzie a little bit later. That's going to be really interesting. I do think that my frustration with Marcell Ozuna is a little bit of a scapegoat, really, because the bigger issue here is Atlanta's underperformance against bad teams. And with this loss last night, the Braves are now 0-4 against Cincinnati this year. They're 5-8 against the Nationals. And by the way, I believe this is the first year to have a losing record against the Nationals, I think since 2019. They had that stat during the Nationals series. It was in the team's game notes that they gave us. I don't quite have it in front of me. They're 1-2 versus the Chicago White Sox, who are on track to be the worst record-wise team in the modern baseball era. They're going to beat the 1969 expansion New York Mets for losses. So that's 6-14 combined against the Reds, the White Sox, and the Nationals. And in those games, pulled the numbers this morning, in the games, those 20 games, the Braves have batted .216 with a 643 OPS and 3.25 runs per game. If that 6-14 is even just 10-10, I think you're in a situation where Atlanta's solidly in the wild card. You're at the number 2 spot. And you don't have these concerns about, are you going to be home in October or not? If you have a winning record against those teams, you're probably either pushing the Phillies for the division lead, or you're solidly in the first wild card spot. But it's just been, this team has underperformed against bad teams this year. And I know some of that was very beginning of the season before we knew how bad the White Sox were. They played to start the year off. But even I think that one loss to the White Sox was a shutout. You got shut out by the White Sox. So I think that's the real frustration with this team. I mentioned in the takeaways that from last night that going into yesterday, FanGraphs had Atlanta with better postseason odds than New York. Atlanta was at 60.4%. New York was at 56.2%. And I tweeted last night, I would be shocked if Atlanta was over 50% this morning. They are. They're at 51.7% chance of making the postseason. So they went from 60-something to 51. But the Mets are now 70.9% chance of making the postseason. So the Diamondbacks, 77.9. The Mets, 70.9. Atlanta is on the outside looking in, and the odds are getting slimmer by the day. If this 3-game losing streak becomes a 4-game losing streak tonight, I'm really worried that they are going to miss the postseason.
Yeah, I continue to make jokes saying I'm going to wear a black suit when it's finally time to talk about the eulogy of the Braves, but I think we are getting really near that point right now. With 2 games being out, I know 2 games doesn't seem like a lot, but there's only 11 games remaining, and the teams above them, especially the New York Mets, are playing really good baseball. I think it's time to start paying attention to what the Diamondbacks are doing. Maybe stay up a little late and get a couple of wakeless nights, if you will, if you're a Braves fan on the East Coast, and start paying attention to what the Diamondbacks are doing, because I think that is going to be your better chance of finding yourself back in the wild card spot, is taking it from the reigning National League champions.
Yeah, this has been frustrating. All right, and in just a minute, let's talk about Ozzie Albies. He's set to come back this weekend, but it'll be a little bit different. He'll be doing something he hasn't really done a lot in before. We'll break that down next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to the Braves Today podcast. I'm Lindsay Crosby. He's Christian Rauh. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at Crosby Baseball. He's at Christian S. Rauh, R-A-U-H. You can find all of our written work at bravestoday.com. All right, so Ozzie Albies made a rehab start last night for the Gwinnett Stripers, goes 2 for 3 with a home run, walks once, scores a run here, 3 total RBI. Really good outing. But the issue you have here, so Ozzie is batting right-handed only. He has said that his left-handed swing is still not comfortable. He has discomfort, so he's going to come back as a righty. Last night, the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp, AAA affiliate of the Miami Marlins, threw a lefty on the mound in Braxton Garrett. The home run that Ozzie Albies hit was off of reliever Josh Simpson, who is also a lefty. So right-handed hitting against a lefty is something that he's done plenty of. That is the thing that he has done thousands of times in his career. What we're looking for is him batting right-handed against a right-handed pitcher. He has 862 career games. He has 3,763 career plate appearances. 15 of those were as a righty pitcher, a righty hitter facing a righty pitcher. He's got 3 home runs in those situations. And we'll have a great piece coming out on the Braves Today Substack later this week about those 15 at-bats, not counting the postseason, because he has, I think, 2 against Zach Greinke in the World Series. But a lot of the great performance in those has been against position players, pitching and blowouts and things like that. Yep. So I guess, one, how frustrating is it that you sent him on some rehab starts to face righty pitching and he didn't get to face righty pitching?
Yeah, I think Miami probably did that on purpose, right? Yeah. I don't know if they did, but you got to think that they probably have a little.
I would have. Absolutely.
Have a division member? Yeah, you might have. But yeah, I think he's going to eventually see it. You have to think the odds are in his favor. There's more righty than lefties usually in a certain rotation. But it's important that Ozzie Albies sees right-handed pitching. We've mentioned that there's not a lot of it in his career, and he needs that that type of in-game play, especially in his rehab before he comes up here. He has no problem against lefties, as you mentioned. If the Braves can make the postseason, they are most likely set to face the Milwaukee Brewers in the first round of the postseason. Assuming they are the final wild card spot, they'll play the worst division winner. And right now that seems to be the Milwaukee Brewers. Almost every single one of their starting pitchers are right-handed. Frankie Montas, Freddie Peralta, Joe Ross, Colin Ray, they're all right-handed. It's the airbender Devin Williams, their amazing reliever out of the bullpen, right-handed. So there's a lot of right-handed pitching on that Brewers squad. Really, their only lefty is DL Hall and Hobie Milner. Other than that, it's all righties. So it is super important that Ozzie Albies, if he wants to have an impact when he comes back to the Braves, if the Braves are still in position to find a way to get into the postseason, that he gets that hits against right-handers. Because, as I mentioned, that Brewers squad is loaded with righties.
I will say that Adam Mazur, I believe, is the starter for Jacksonville on Wednesday. He is a right-handed pitcher, so it's a righty starter for Jacksonville as of now. Obviously, they could change that, but as of now, it is that. Before I get off of that game real quick, Hurston Waldrop, 6 innings pitched, 3 hits, no runs, 2 walks to 7 strikeouts. One of his more impressive outings of the year. He's a guy who struggled a little bit. He had that elbow injury, and coming back from that, he's been a little shaky, but either way, looking good. I do want to address, a lot of people have said we want Ozzie to bat righty all the time because his numbers aren't as good as a lefty. And to their point, Ozzie Albies as a left-handed hitter, where is it here? Yeah. As a left-handed hitter against righties, that's all but one of his plate appearances are against righties. He's batting .247 with a .743 OPS. He's got 94 homers in 2,809 plate appearances. As a lefty, against lefties batting as a righty, he's batting .339 with 42 homers and 938 plate appearances. It's a .933 OPS. So he's been really good as a righty versus as a lefty. His batting average is 80 points better, right? His OPS is 190 points better. So I'm not opposed to the concept of Ozzie Albies coming back as strictly a right-handed hitter. What I don't love, though, is trying to make that adjustment midseason. Because, like we said, he has 15 plate appearances in the regular season and 2 more in the postseason as a righty facing righties. And pitches just look different coming in when you're on the other side of the plate with a pitcher of a different handedness. Pitches just look different. And it's hard to think about how well he's going to be able to do trying to make that adjustment on the fly in the regular season. And like you alluded to, at a time when you are desperately trying to make the postseason, you don't have time for him to figure it out over 2 weeks or 3 weeks, because in 2 weeks, if he hasn't figured it out, there's a good chance the season's over. So I'm not opposed to Ozzie being a right-handed hitter only. I don't love the idea of him trying to make that change mid-season. At the same time, I don't really know what other options you have. If he's able to come back, while I don't love the defensive hit you'll take at second base, going from Whit Merrifield to Ozzie Albies, I think adding the potential of Ozzie's bat, even if it's a righty against righties, outweighs that a little bit for Atlanta.
Yeah, no, you're true. And the fact that it's not even just mid-season, Lindsay. Right now, I'd argue that the Braves are in the playoffs right now. Like, the postseason has already started for Atlanta because the team has not been able to figure it out right now with that offense, and they are slipping away. You can consider that they're down 2-0 in the first playoff series with the Mets and the Diamondbacks. That's what I'm considering it for the next week or so. And then we can reevaluate what happens after those weekend series. But right now, the Braves are already in the postseason. And you get Ozzie Albies back. If he can perform at what we have seen Ozzie Albies, great. But again, he doesn't have that sample size. Those numbers you mentioned, how great he's looked, those numbers don't talk about him hitting righty against righty. So we really need to get that in the rehab assignments so he can show it when he gets back, assuming we see him on Friday.
Yeah, and then when he does come back, I want to figure out, there's been some speculation. I think Mark Bowman of MLB.com and David O'Brien of The Athletic both kind of threw this out on Twitter, that they would expect Whit Merrifield, rather than moving to third base, to move to left field to accommodate Ozzie Albies coming back. Am I crazy for thinking that's a bad idea? Because while Gio Urshela has been very good defensively at third base, he's also batting just 222 with a 247 on base and a 322. It's 570 OPS. And Whit Merrifield, so much of his game is reliant on his speed. And asking him to do extra running on a broken foot in the outfield feels like it's a bad idea. Am I wrong for thinking that the move here is to move Merrifield to third base and then late in games put Urshela in for defense at third and move Merrifield to second for defense? And that way you can still keep playing Ramon Laureano in left.
No, I love that idea. I think that's a fantastic idea, is to have Urshela as your defensive replacement. He also hits a lot better against righties as well. Urshela could come off the plate if need be. I don't have Merrifield's splits in front of me. I don't know if that would be a good platoon split or whatnot, but Merrifield's defense is just as good as Urshela's has been, I think, in my mind. I think Urshela is a great defender. Don't get me wrong. He would be a fantastic defensive replacement if need be, but the bat of Merrifield needs to be in the lineup. But so does Ramon Laureano's, and he doesn't get used enough. I know he already gets days off when we don't want to see that happen. So it's finding a way to get him out of the lineup more just doesn't make sense to me. So I agree with you 100%. I think if you want to find a way to get Urshela in the lineup even more when Ozzie comes back, Merrifield should take over third base. And then maybe you have that conversation of Urshela at shortstop, because I think right now Urshela and Arcia are probably at about the same level offensively.
Yeah, see, and I think if you're at the same level offensively, I think that's your issue, because Orlando Arcia is giving you very good defense.
That's
Other
true.
than, like, that's his only real saving grace. He had an error. I think it was last night or 2 nights ago, where he fielded a liner and he went to throw to second base to double it up, and Whit Merrifield missed the throw and it went out into right field. But Gio Urshela, so Urshela did make 24 starts at short for the Yankees in 2021. 970 fielding percentage. He had 2 errors and 200 innings. They looked like they were subbing him for him quite a bit. Defensive replacement for him late in the games. It could have been a pinch hit thing too. His offensive numbers weren't amazing.
Yeah.
And he played 3 innings there on defense in 2022 with Minnesota. He made 8 starts there last year for the Angels as well. So he has played some shortstop. Everybody's telling me, hey, put Whit Merrifield at shortstop. He's literally never played shortstop in the major leagues. So
Yeah, and you have a foot injury. Not put with a guy with a foot injury. We're talking about maybe not putting him in the left field because of that. Having him play shortstop, arguably the toughest position in all of baseball, on a broken foot, and you've never played it before. That's one of those head scratching moves again. Let's not do that, especially when the Braves are right now in the postseason. Like, this is the playoffs, guys. Let's not do that. No, I agree.
Exactly. I do also want to point out he's only played 116 innings at third base in his career, right? So much of his time he's been primarily a second baseman and an outfielder. And so I do think it's worth mentioning that Whit Merrifield, even third base, is asking to do something he's not done a ton of. But I still think that's better than shortstop. So
Same.
I could see if you feel like Urshela could hit well, giving RC a day off and putting Urshela at short. But I do think your best way to configure this here is Urshela as your defensive replacement at third and moving Merrifield to second and lifting Ozzie from the game. I don't know if Snit's going to do that. That's not been something he's been really willing to do on some of these veterans, but I really think that's the approach he's going to have to take down the stretch just to maximize, hey, this is our best chance to win, is to have better defense on the field. Because right now, like you said, you're in the playoffs. You got to win. Tonight, you have to feel pretty decent about this. Spencer Schwellenbach, 6-7, 3.73 ERA, taking on Jacob Junis, 4.0, 2.73. First pitch is at 6:40 tonight. You're going to have takeaways for Braves today. This feels a winnable game, obviously. So it did last night, too. Even the Dodgers on Sunday, that felt like a winnable game until you gave up the lead there. Predictions on this? Does Atlanta go 1-1 in the remaining series? They go 2-0. What happens here?
I think they have to go 2-0. I think they have to prove a point that they are still in it, and this offense needs to be the prime reason. I don't have any ill confidence or no confidence from Spencer Schwellenbach. I think he's going to be able to get the job done. Junis is one of those guys that you don't see a lot of length from, so you're going to be able to get to Cincinnati's bullpen quick. I think he's only got 5 innings in his last 10 starts, in once or twice. Actually, this is only his second start of the season. He did mostly come out of the bullpen. So in both of those starts, he did have 5 innings. Each time he looked pretty decent too. He has only allowed 1 run in those last 2 starts. So in the last 10 innings, he's only seen 1 earned run on 4 hits. He has been pitching some good baseball as of late. That's just another reason for the Braves to wake up and get to him. There's just because he's been pitching good doesn't mean that the Braves offense can't do it. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I think this is a good way to wrap it up, Lindsay. This team has a lot of talent. We know that. We have seen it all season long. That is there, regardless of regardless of the injuries. We know that this team can do it. The names on those lineup cards that Snit puts out aren't names that were of days old. This is a team that can produce, and it's just not happening. So if there's any kind of alarm clock that needs to go off in the Braves locker room, it needs to happen before 6:40 tonight, because they need to wake up and they need to get going, because the playoffs are on the line. And what a perfect way to start it against the Cincinnati Reds team, where you have not won a game all season long against. And as you mentioned, if those 3 teams that you alluded to, those losing teams earlier in the season, if they were just 10-10 in those, we would not be talking about them being a potential playoff team. We'd be talking about them potentially winning the NL East. Yeah, they need to wake up. It needs to happen, and it needs to start tonight. So my prediction, my expectation, and quite honestly, the only thing that needs to happen is they have to win both these games starting tonight against Cincinnati.
Yeah, they need to go too. I hope it happens. I don't know if it will, but we'll see. This has been Braves Today for Wednesday, September 18th. Remind you to follow us on Twitter. The show, Braves_today, the writing, bravestoday.com. If you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, hit the notification bell so you know when we drop a new episode. And until next time, this has been Braves Today.